And we are live. Hello, folks, and welcome to Pop Culture Pastors Hour. It's good to be with you on this snowy Tuesday or whenever you happen to be listening to this and whatever the weather is where you are. I am MaryAnn McKibben Dana, and I write at the Blue Room.
And I'm Edward Goode, and I write at Imago Scriptura. And wandering around in my office that you may hear potentially some barking at some point is my dog Scout. She's curled up over on her pillow in the corner, so I can't get her on
Yes.
video. So anyway,
All right.
welcome.
Her
We're glad you
presence
all are
is
here.
with us. That's great.
Yes.
Yes. And you all are managing ice-ageddon as well as you can, or maybe you didn't get as much ice. We got some snow and then layers of sleet.
Yeah, we just got snow and now just ridiculous cold, like negative 15 wind chill this morning. So that was great.
Yeah.
Yes, my own passive Karadhas. So.
Yeah. Right. Maybe we need to share one of those pictures when we post the show notes.
Yeah, there we go.
We did a little, Ed did a little Lego reenactment of the pass, the mountain pass. So anyway, we are, sticking with our series here on Lord of the Rings, and everybody's talking about heated rivalry, but we are sticking with our plan. I don't know. Are you watching that show, Ed?
I'm not. I haven't yet. I plan on it, but we haven't seen it yet. So.
Yeah. Anyway, today we wanted to dig into some of the deeper themes of the trilogy, whether we're talking about the books, we'll mainly be talking about the movies. But we wanted to dig in to, and it feels, I don't know if you feel this, Ed, but just with everything going on in the world, it feels both frivolous and necessary to be thinking about the stories that we care about and the themes that they elucidate, and how we can see those at work and how they fuel the work of justice and peace building and all the good things that we do. So today is Big Theme Day. And next Tuesday, the 3rd, we are going to be meeting at 1 Eastern time to do categories. So favorite villain, hero that gets on your nerves, just some fun kind of categories around this series. And as we thought about how to structure this episode around themes, there are so many rich things going on with the series, and we decided to go with a kind of set of virtues, values, however you want to describe them, Ed, that have been important to you. So I wanted if you would just kind of frame for us how we'll be organizing our conversation.
Sure. So in the New Testament, so I sign off all of my posts with grace, peace, love, hope, and joy, which kind of gets acronymed down to this really weird thing of GPLHJ, I think. Yeah. And so and it's kind of something that's grown. Originally, it actually started kind of with the stuff that like Paul writes in his letters of just grace and peace be with you. And then it just sort of, I felt like love should be in there. So it was grace, peace, and love. And then I read this book about hope by someone who I'm happen to be in conversation with. And I was like, hope needs to be in there. And then joy ended up. So it's just sort of grown. I think it's at its max now. I think getting to 6 like gets to be 5 really feels like the best. And besides, it's the last question in the Colbert questionnaire is what's 5 words to describe the rest of your life? And I'll go with grace, peace, love, hope, and joy. So yeah. So we talked about kind of structuring the themes around that. And I will say, just want to note one thing, just kind of a quick book recommendation. We were MaryAnn mentioned about feeling a bit, necessary, but also a little frivolous, talking about our favorite stories. And one of the books I'm reading right now is a book called Everything is a Story by Caitlin Curtis. And it is so, so, so good. And it really is just about the necessity of story in our lives and the vitality that story has, and the ways in which stories, she kind of goes through the whole book really comparing them to like acorns and oak trees. that they take root, they, fall as seeds and then they take root in us and begin to flourish. And I think there's something to be said, both Tolkien and his contemporary C.S. Lewis really were recognizing that there was a loss of story for people, and some might say, loss of myth,
Mm.
common mythology, and especially Tolkien really sought to give something of that in what he wrote. Lewis as well, a bit with the Narnia series, but I feel like Tolkien, this one is a little more central on that. So,
That's beautiful.
so
Does
anyway,
does
yeah.
Caitlin Curtis talk about these stories in particular, or are you just reading it with this series in mind?
I don't think so far, I don't think she said anything about Lord of the Rings.
Mhm.
She's an indigenous writer, so a lot of it is kind of tying back to her experience from her, ancestors and the ways the stories were passed along. And so, yeah, so highly, highly recommend it. But but we are here to talk Lord of the Rings. So,
Yep,
so,
that's great.
um, and if you saw the shared note that MaryAnn and I have, we have a lot on here. So we'll
Yes,
see
that's
how
right.
much
We're gonna
we get through this. So,
absolutely.
so let's start with grace. Grace is a bit of a loaded word. Maybe of all of them that I've got in kind of that may be the one that seems to have the most baggage to it. Maybe the most kind of religious one of them. Um,
Good
I
point.
remember being taught at one point of, well, what does grace mean? Well, it's the acronym God's riches at Christ's expense. Was
I've
one
never
that I
heard that
heard.
before.
Really?
Yeah.
Ah, see, this is my evangelical days. Um, so, but there is something to be said about, grace being this undeserved thing that we receive. More than just like a table grace. So kind of Marianne, like what does it mean to you? Like what is the
Yeah, I think that's a great I mean, that acronym actually helps. It's not exactly the way I would put it, and I don't think it's the way you would put it now, but it does kind of help. It's a helpful shorthand for people who kind of have a more traditional view of Christianity and what the cross is all about. But the idea that something is a gift that is given that you don't have to earn, that you can't earn, that to me is what grace is. And one of the things that I was thinking about with this one, and you actually share what you shared, because the word grace actually comes up in this story or in the movie version of this story with Arwen. Do you want to just
Yeah,
share
so
that scene?
there's yeah, so in Two Towers in the film there is the moment where it at first sort of gives the hint that the idea that maybe Aragorn was killed. Um and you of course find out he didn't because he's got some very, very thick plot armor. Um
Yes.
And, but while he's sort of coming out of his stupor, he has a vision of his beloved, betrothed, Arwen, the daughter of Elrond the elf, appearing to him, and I don't remember the exact language, but essentially, it's what grace I've received, I pass to you. Um, in this kind of like vision dream thing that he has.
Mhm.
Um,
And that
yeah.
somehow through, again, plot armor and, vague elf magic restores him enough, and of course, his horse comes up and, Brago helps deliver him to, the rest of the people gathered, and he can report to them what's going on with this impending, um, invasion, siege, of Rohan. And as you were describing that scene, it highlighted for me, I think one of the aspects of grace is that it is, I was gonna say transactional, but it's not transactional, but it is relational. I think some of these we can feel peace on within ourselves. We can feel a sense of love and hope. Love may also require an other, but grace implies an other. a grace that is given to you or that you receive from someone or, you know, the world, the universe, God, however you think of that. Um, and and I guess what I was thinking about with grace is one of the major themes that I think is very explicit in the series is this idea of mercy, and we see that at various times, like with Gollum. People don't lash out at him, don't treat him with maybe what he deserves. And that turns out to be a very good strategic thing in the end, because it is only through Gollum's receiving of the ring, taking the ring by force, that it is ultimately destroyed. And so it seems fairly explicit on Tolkien's part to say mercy and pity is another word that's used, that those virtues are really important to the ultimate end of destroying evil. It's an important tool or way to embody our relationship with one another. And I guess I haven't asked, I didn't prepare you to answer this, but how do mercy and grace kind of interact? Because I think the word mercy is, or pity is much more explicitly named than grace
Mhm.
is. But
I so I'm thinking of the scene where they're in the mines of Moria, and um, Frodo says to Gandalf that how he wishes that Frodo had just killed Gollum when he had the chance,
Mhm,
and it was the conversation that follows is this sense of kind of the recognition of how broken Gollum had become because of the ring,
mhm,
and that place that he'd come to of being so corrupted by it that and a lot of it not really of his doing.
mhm,
It's the power of this other thing. So, I mean, I think that is for me kind of like where mercy comes in, is this recognition that, I think it's Brian Stevenson's quote, that we are more than our worst mistake. I think
mhm,
I'm not saying it exactly right. That we how do we have that recognition that mercy factors in, that there is this willingness to not give the punishment that
mhm,
someone deserves, quote unquote, um, but potentially hoping, believing that there can be a new way. Now,
mhm,
that can be, in the kind of Christian world, you can kind of get into this thing about cheap grace and, just sort of you overlook things that, are just wrong,
mhm.
like, um,
Yeah.
and so there is that really fine line of how that is. But I think a lot of it for me is the sense that, yeah, we allow people the the possibility to change? Do we recognize the situations that maybe have shaped people to
Mhm,
who they are today? Um,
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I haven't tested this out. This is really me thinking out loud, but when I think of the difference between mercy and grace, I think they're both relational in the way that I was talking about earlier, a gift given. And I think of mercy as withholding some judgment or withholding some negative consequence towards someone, and grace is more of a positive gift given. Um, but in both cases, you have this connection of what someone deserves, and there's a whole judgment and kind of way we could unpack who decides. Um, and when you look at the way Gollum first, I mean, Smeagol, when he first sees the ring, and I can't remember whether the book reflects this as well, but it is instant. He So there is something pitiful about that, that he didn't have a chance. it ensnares him instantly. In the way that others, there's some more ambiguity of I feel it taking hold of me, but I can fight back a little bit, or I've got a Sam around me who's going to kind of help me carry this. And Spiegel had no one. So that is a case in which you do feel, or I feel a little bit of mercy of, I don't want to go down too long of a rabbit hole here, but it's interesting to me the extent to which you have people who do really awful things, who rise in their own power and influence in our world, and you find out that they were bullied as a kid, and they lashed out in response to that, or there's just deeply damaged stuff going on, and it does. We need to protect people from folks who would do them harm, but not in a vengeful way, but just to say, maybe that's the expression of mercy. I'm kind of going off a tangent a little bit, but yeah. So, anything else about grace that comes to your mind?
The other thing I'd kind of put in there was also the gifts given to the fellowship in Lothlorien. That, I mean, that's a real tangible, like really like hard and fast specific gift. Like here's your elven rope. But initially, when they first arrive at Lothlorien, it's no, you're not welcome here.
Yeah.
But then they are let in, and then they are each given these gifts that really become central, especially in a couple of cases, become central to this the success of the quest.
Yeah. And that grace, there's that really kind of scene that's kind of played for humor where Samwise receives the rope, the elvish rope, and I think Merry and Pippin have received daggers, and Sam's like, you wouldn't have one of those daggers kind of lying around, would you? And so there is something in that too, that grace isn't always what we want. It isn't expressed in the way that we would always choose, but it is, to be kind of cliche, it's what we need. And so there's a sense that grace is kind of beyond us. It's not, again, not transactional, but it implies a benevolence that knows what we need most. And it doesn't come in the form that we might want.
Well, I know we have other themes to do, but the other thing in this, as you said, this is what we need. Like all of them, I didn't really think about this. It was sort of whether or not Galadriel could, quote, see the future. The things that they got were truly the things they were going to need. Sam wasn't going to need a dagger. He needed rope. Frodo didn't need a dagger. He needed the light.
Yeah.
Merry and Pippin needed the daggers for when they were, and in a sense, Gimli needed that gift from an elf.
Yeah.
Because of maybe his prejudice towards them, and that this gift that gave her 3 hairs from her golden head.
Right.
So
yeah, and he asked for one. So that too is like there's a sense of grace bestows more upon us than a simple transaction. She could have given him 1 hair on her golden head. She gives him 3. Hold on to Gimli, because I think we're going to talk about him later, and I think this relates really well to, as I was thinking about him for one of these later virtues. He embodies it well. So should we move on to peace?
I think we should.
You, I think, I don't know if it's in the notes or perhaps we were just talking, but this wasn't, this is a little tougher one because it is in the end a real battle story. And I wondered, it got me thinking about these, it's just assumed that the way to peace is to defeat evil in the kind of traditional fighting clash of arms way that a lot of these stories are constructed. And it just got me thinking about just war, theory, this idea that we take up arms reluctantly as a last resort, but sometimes we just have to do that. And I wondered if you had any thoughts about that. Um, I I feel like when these movies or when these books are made into movies, and the same thing happened with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the battles really take on a big significance. And it feels like kind of percentage-wise, they are less. I mean, they're in there. The battle, Siege on Helm's Deep, Pelennor Fields, those are there, but uh, the pride of place is a little less emphasized. But it is still like we've got to go right through taking up arms and fighting this evil. And so, yeah, just your thoughts on that as a means toward peace. And we've never talked about how, sort of just war fits into your own theology, but
Mhm.
um, yeah, any thoughts about that?
Yeah. Oof. That's a nice
A
small
small one.
topic. Thanks.
Yes,
Thanks for
right.
that. Um, why am I answering the questions? No.
Well, I
So
mean, I
no,
could
no,
pontificate if
no,
you
no.
want.
So one thing initially is I love the fact that in the Council of Elrond, when they're debating what to do about the ring, their thing isn't we go to war.
That's a great point. That's a great
You know,
point.
it's we have to go destroy the ring.
Yes.
We have to destroy the weapon of the enemy.
There you go.
Um,
And what does
and
Aragorn say to Theoden? War is upon you, whether you would risk it or not. So there
mhm,
is that reluctance. There is that this is our last resort. Anyway, yeah,
mhm.
that's a
Yeah.
great
So
point.
so there is that. Now, I I am a pacifist, um, but I also there is a reality that conflict is there
Mhm.
in human life, and the whether it's between two people, whether it's between you know two nations, or what have you. And I think the danger has become that we have the ability today to literally destroy human life with war.
Yeah.
Whereas 1,000 years ago, wars were horrid and awful, not saying they were good, but they were not to the degree that what war can do today.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I think just war theory makes sense in a lot of ways, but I think it's harder and harder to see how that totally functions in today's
Mhm.
world.
Mhm. It reminds me of the first church I served had a lot of military folks and retired military in it, and one of the I don't mind saying thorns in my side at that church, who also was lovely in many ways, was a man who was much more conservative than I in a whole variety of ways. And I remember we did a Lenten series one year about war and peace. I don't remember kind of what the theme, what we called it, but he who had served in the military himself, I think was kind of a history buff and loved studying war, and he was just very clear in saying we are going to have to repent for our war making when we arrive at um, the final judgment, right? So it's even someone who I think had very little ambiguity in terms of the need for taking up arms and and having a strong defense and all of this was very clear that this is sinful in many ways, and we need to acknowledge that, repent of that, be humble in the reality of that. And so, anyway, I think that's a piece of this. But you also, talk in this section and highlight in our notes. I mean, there's different levels of peace. There's different kinds of peace, right? There's the sort of war and peace, but also inner peace. And what we see is, you know, uh, kind of the Shire, the more what do we call those kind of pastoral scenes, in the sense of
Idyllic.
pasture,
Mhm.
idyllic, yes.
Mhm.
And little moments of peace along the way, which you named some of those in our shared document.
And but that's so to stay with the idea and kind of like war and conflict and things. I mean, that is something that in the midst of that, you need to have those moments. You have to have those moments.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's it has become probably a little bit trite, but the Christmas Day truce, during World War One, that this
Mm-hmm.
moment that these people who 24 hours before were trying to kill each other, that they stopped and they
Mm-hmm.
sang songs together and then weirdly went back to their trenches and picked it back up the next day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the whole thing of like we can overload our nervous systems with all the conflict and all, but we also have to have these moments where it gets released. And in the film, I love that they bring in these moments. And
Mm-hmm.
I one of the other ones I wrote about was the journey that they take from the Golden Hall to Helm's Deep. That is a journey that is fraught. Like there's an attack that happens during that,
Yeah.
but there's enough where they're talking stories and laughing, and Gimli's falling off the horse, and
Right.
uh,
Yeah.
Eowyn is making a really horrid soup. Like
Mm-hmm.
that
Right.
there are these moments that you just can kind of go,
Right. And
yeah,
a contrast, one thing that we don't see is that kind of levity, and I don't know what the better word for humanity is because that centers human beings, and this is a world with elves and dwarfs and halflings. Uh, but we don't see that among the Uruk-hai or the orcs at all. I mean, because
hmm
we get little glimpses of their world, and there isn't that joy, which we'll talk about joy in a minute. But I think peace relates to that too. They're at each other's throats all the time, and it does speak to the corruption of the system, whether they're under the spell of the ring. They are. I mean, it flows downhill, so to speak, right?
hmm
But that's a contrast from that Christmas Eve, where it's humans across those trenches from each other,
hmm
singing Silent Night and playing football/soccer with one
yeah.
another.
Well,
So,
still seeing the humanity
right.
in one another,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
that yeah. So I know we yeah. So I'm not really sure I was going to go with that last part there, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one other note that's in
Yeah.
there is the books have a very dramatically different ending than the films.
Yes. Talk about
You
that.
know, yeah, in the books there is what's I think it's entitled in the chapter "The Scouring of the Shire."
Mhm.
That in the books, Saruman doesn't die in the tower. Saruman actually goes and basically takes over the Shire while everybody's gone,
Mhm.
and corrupts it, and it's messed. And basically, there's one more battle that Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin have to fight to retake the Shire, to try to reclaim that place.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah, it's a very interesting thing that doesn't. And I understand there are already 12 endings or whatever. So,
Right.
to add in another one would be, and then I think it also doesn't wrap things up in the Hollywood way.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but there is something of the hero's journey, the traditional kind of the hero's journey, that when you return home, home is not going to be the same, not only because it has changed, but you have changed.
Yes.
And
Right.
so Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin have all been changed by what they've experienced. And so returning back, it sort of seems like Sam and Merry and Pippin kind of go back into regular life, but Frodo can't.
Mhm.
Frodo just
Mhm.
cannot. Um,
And you even get a
so
sense of what it has cost them in the movie. They leave out the scouring of the Shire, but one of my favorite moments in the multiple endings is when the four of them are in that pub together, and there's all this levity going around, and there's just these knowing looks that they trade with one another while they sip their beverages, and that it weighs heavily on them, even the ones who ultimately stay. And you get the sense that Pippin will find that little spark again, and Mary will be looking out for him, and Sam, of course, goes on to marry and have a family. Um, but yes, that hero's journey is nodded at in a very subtle way, just in that very, I think it's a wordless scene, where they're
Totally.
just looking
Hmm.
at each other and quietly sipping their drinks. And so peace. Yeah, I just am thinking about peace. Jesus, I mean, talked a good bit about peace, and he gives peace not as the world gives. And what does that mean? Um, when I hear that, I think it's a deeper peace, but maybe also it's a peace that I guess costs something. I don't know. I'm still kind of thinking about this, but like, um, it's a deep peace that doesn't deny that you are changed and impacted by
Hmm.
the struggle, whatever the struggle
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Hmm.
Should we move on to love?
Yeah, let's do.
Okay, so we have a whole bunch of things with love. I mean, there's romantic love, there's the love of friends, there's the love of creation. There's also sort of the places where it seems like love doesn't exist. We talked a little bit of that just now with the orcs, the orcs and the uruks, um, and um, and also the seeming lack of love that is there between a father and son with
Mhm.
Denethor and Faramir.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, MaryAnn, where do you want to start
Oh my gosh.
with a
Yes.
nice small topic of love here?
I know, that's
Um,
right. Well, let's just go, one of my kind of digressions in thinking about this is in the Rings of Power, which is a creative midrash, if you will, I guess, in some ways,
Great way to
um,
put it.
uh, of the story of how the Ring of Power came to be. And we see the orcs have families, they're married, or partnered, I guess, because there's little baby orcs. And that was controversial, for some who watch. I mean, there was a lot about the series that the diehards had issues with. I enjoyed it and will continue to dip into it as they create more seasons. But um, the orcs are kind of humanized in a way that in Tolkien's book and in the movies, they are just very objectively the bad guys. And do they love in the way that we love? I don't know, uh, but perhaps one definition of love is to see the fullness of someone, the human. Again, we need a better than the humanity, the dignity. We'll go with the dignity, uh, and to to feel that they are somehow not outside of that realm of being able to be loved and to love. Um, so that's just a little um, maybe digression there,
Mhm.
um, but I think to name check another series that we both love, that wonderful line in The Last Jedi, when Rose says, "This is how we win, not by fighting what we hate, but saving what we love." There's so much of that in these stories
Mhm.
that it's
Mhm.
really about. I mean, I think Aragorn's final kind of stand outside the gates of Mordor when he says, "For Frodo." Um, at that point, they have reason to believe that Frodo has failed. They see the mithril vest that he has worn and are led to believe that he suffered and he's ultimately failed in his quest to destroy the ring. And yet there is still this expression of, and there it was just Viggo Mortensen, man, the way he delivers that line, it's not triumphalistic. It's not, it really is just with tears in his eyes for Frodo. And it isn't, for me, it's an expression of love.
Yeah. Mm. Mm.
In the end. And of
Yeah,
course, Gimli
absolutely.
and Legolas, like, I didn't think it would end this way. And, what about dying side by side with a friend, not dying side by side with an elf? And you have that tenderness that Gimli feels toward Legolas, saying,
Mhm.
I can do that. Yeah.
That I can do
So,
that. Yeah.
so those are just a few scenes that come to mind.
Yeah. Well, so in a sense, the again, dignifying whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it of the orcs in the Rings of Power, Tolkien kind of does something with that for when the books came out is radical
Mm.
by humanizing, dignifying again,
Yeah.
the trees.
Mm.
That
Mhm.
at the time when Tolkien wrote the book, there was none of the science that we have come to see right now of the ways in which we are learning how trees communicate, that trees are in relationship with each other, that trees direct resources among trees in a glen or a forest to protect the ones that are the most vulnerable, or to warn when there's a pestilence or a fire, or all these things that we are learn. Science is showing us what trees are doing,
Mm.
and that the modernist perspective was, okay, trees are alive, but they're just plants and they're there for us to use. Now, our indigenous ancestors had a very different. Many of them had a very different perspective on that.
Mm.
Um, but by Tolkien giving the Ents this sense, it was, and even that there was at some point relationships, that the Ent wives who unfortunately have gone missing, you
Mhm.
know. Um, so yeah, so Tolkien even does something of that, of bringing personality, life, vitality, relational things to the Ents that would make somebody, Merry and Pippin, maybe go, oh wow, yeah, I could be, even when they're smoking the weed at the leaf at the end of the two towers, that
Yeah.
is a distant relation,
Mhm.
so it changes the ways that you see things,
Yeah.
and what love can do in terms of changing the ways that we see other people.
Mhm.
Um,
Wow.
yeah.
I was at a conference last week in which we were talking about this great commandment to love God, love neighbor as we love ourselves. And when we got to the love neighbor part, we actually heard from a rabbi up in Chicago named Evan Moffick, and he was reminding us of the work of Martin Buber and the I thou relationship, which is distinct from I it. The way we objectify or see another person or entity, a tree, and what it can do for us. We instrumentalize the other, and that makes it an it, like the trees. What do they possibly have to talk about other than the texture of squirrel droppings? Gimli is skeptical, right, of this relationship, and in contrast, I thou is seeing this is my paraphrase of Buber, but like seeing the divine in the other. And as you were talking about love, it has me wanting to throw in the word reverence with this because it is how, we're used to, this is kind of an axiom in our flavors of Christianity, that love is an action, that love is a verb, right? It's through what we do, not just a feeling that we have. And I agree with that, but I think it's tied up in the idea of a reverence toward the other, seeing the thou in the other. And to me, as you're describing, especially the Ents and this indigenous tradition that we who are not did not grow up in that tradition are getting to glimpse in the work of Caitlin Curtis and others, Robin Wall Kimmerer and others. Am I
Mm-hmm.
getting that? Yeah. I've got the book somewhere,
Yeah.
Braiding
Yep.
Sweetgrass.
Robin Wall Kimmerly. Yep.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, a reverence, which doesn't mean that we don't need the Earth's resources, but we treat it in a different way with a reverence rather
Mhm.
than something to be exploited and dominated. So,
Mhm. Well,
um,
and that gets to really the heart of love. I mean, that's
mhm,
and you see in the other relationships,
yeah,
um, there's an incredible tenderness that, especially between Frodo and Sam, that is expressed that, is just beautiful.
yeah,
And Elijah Wood and Sean Astin do an incredible job of of portraying that. It's
yeah.
just lovely.
Mhm.
Um,
And, Dom Monahan and Billy Boyd
mhm.
also. There's a scene, and I have the book series up and could probably find it if I paged through because I'm sure I highlighted it, um, where I believe it is Frodo is sleeping with his head in Sam's lap. I'm pretty sure that it's Frodo sleeping in Sam, not the other way around, and it just the way it was described was so touching to me, and, what a what a healthy expression of masculinity, in a world that needs to see it. You probably saw the post that I made a couple days ago about what we saw in our learning about, Alex Pretty, who just was killed by ICE agents, and competing, conceptions of what masculinity is.
Mhm.
He was a healer. He worked in a hospital. You've probably seen the video, I'm sure, Ed, of him reading those words after, a veteran had died, and contrast that with the dominance, the show of force, yeah. And so that's another thing that I think is under discussed in these stories is what it has to say about what healthy masculinity looks like. And you see that in
Mhm.
all of the male characters, and let's face it, most of the characters in the story are male.
Yes,
But yeah,
does not pass the Bechdel test.
no, no, probably not. Um, yeah. So, but you mentioned Denethor and Faramir, and just on our notes, you just gave it a yikes. But that there is also the other side where that is not present, that kind of tenderness.
Yeah.
Um, and that's just an important piece to acknowledge as well. So,
Well, it's also something to acknowledge that in the books, Denethor is not portrayed as bad
mhm,
as he is in the films.
yeah,
So I know there needed sort of a tangible villain
mhm,
beyond Saruman and this disembodied eye.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, that's an interest. That's one of those shifts that they made from the books to the movies.
right,
And yeah, so
yeah, yeah. Shall we
all
move
right,
on to
hope.
hope?
Yeah.
This is a
So
big one.
yeah, so I
I
mean,
want to.
we could just Sam speech this the whole way, like.
That's right.
I mean,
That's right.
we could. And
Yep.
if you're not familiar with it, just go on YouTube and look up Sam's speech and you'll see it. It's
Mhm.
just so, yeah. I don't know if you
And
wanted to say something on that, or if we wanted to kind of
well, it,
go
it
on the
relates
other
to
things with
Sam.
hope.
I
Yeah.
actually found a quote that I had highlighted that I think, in that speech he says, folks in these great stories of old had chances of turning back, but they didn't because there was good worth fighting for, which is not the same thing as saying that the good will prevail, but it's worth fighting for. And I I think this is reflected in this little. I want to read a couple of sentences from the book, and this is 77% through the trilogy. So we're deep into things near the end. So it says, but even as hope died in Sam, or seemed to die, it was turned to a new strength. Sam's plain hobbit face grew stern, almost grim, as the will hardened in him, and he felt through all his limbs a thrill as if he was turning into some creature of stone and steel that neither despair nor weariness nor endless barren miles could subdue. Whew, that's so good. And that's kind of a piece with the kind of I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. And a kind of an awareness like they're drinking the rest of their water. They're leaving their provisions behind because they don't think they're going to make a return journey. But I love this idea of hope dying or seeming to die, but then in the death of the hope comes the strength, which maybe is even more durable. I mean, hope is woven throughout the series. I don't think Tolkien is saying that hope is irrelevant. I think quite the opposite. But when hope is completely lost, there are other resources that we can draw on, and I find that a really compelling idea.
Mhm. Or maybe it's, I mean, I read that as the tangible feeling of hope, like, okay, maybe we're gonna do this. Maybe, okay, that 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 it's that point where it's like, I don't think we're gonna get it, but I'm just gonna keep going.
Yeah.
I've come this far, I'm gonna keep going.
Mhm.
And so it's almost like go back to for Frodo,
Mhm.
with Aragorn, that yeah, I mean, it really seemed like the rings back in with Sauron. Frodo and Sam were dead, um, and it's like, no, we're gonna keep going. Uh, We know it probably where it's gonna end up, but we're gonna keep going.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely, absolutely, and I mean, to again go back to Star Wars and Rogue One, when Jyn Erso says we're going to keep taking the next chance and the next chance until all the chances are spent,
as they're
and
spent.
same idea here. As long
Mhm.
as Sam has life and breath in him, he's going to continue to do the work of doing what he promised, which was not to leave Frodo. And that's just all over. I mean, you talked about Sam's speech, but also Theoden's speech. I think I talked last time we talked about. You're talking about you mentioned Pelennor Fields, but the if this is to be our end, I would have them make such an end as to be worthy of remembrance when it really
Mhm.
looks hopeless at Helm's Deep. But they're going to act with valor, and there is a weird paradoxical hope in that, even um, the hope in the lost cause um, that may not be lost
Yeah,
because there can
but
always be a miracle there.
yeah, but in that also, you had points where outwardly, at least, Theoden had lost hope.
Hmm.
What can one do against such hate?
Yeah.
Um, that like he's done.
Hmm. Hmm.
And Aragorn's the one who's like, "No, ride out with me. Like
Yes.
we're doing this." And
Right.
that hope is also that thing that we can transmit to people.
Hmm. Hmm.
And maybe that ties in with grace, that,
Yes.
it's that thing that we impart. It's not just something that is only just us, but I can bring hope to somebody else
Yes.
who
Well,
may not
and
feel it.
hope, as I've written about and we've talked about, I mean, for me, hope is agency. That's if I had to give a one sentence or a one word definition of hope, it's and what I love about that, what can men do? They can write out and meet it. And I don't know if you saw this just last night. I will add this to the show notes, but somebody shared with me. I think I'm going to get her name quite not quite right, but Tessie McMillan Cotton, a black kind of thinker, and she was talking about how people are really exhausted in this moment right now in our culture. And she said, I don't think a lot of people are exhausted because they've been doing too much. I think they're exhausted because they haven't figured out what to do. They're not maybe not doing enough. Now, a lot of people we're plugged into are doing a lot. But I was like, wow, what an interesting thought to think about. Exhaustion comes when we feel hopeless, when we feel helpless. And there's an energy. And so when Aragorn says, "Ride out with me," um, he's giving Theoden something to do. There is something still to do. And I think that's really powerful in thinking about hope and how we
Mhm.
carry it
Yeah,
and give it to
yeah.
one another.
absolutely.
The other thing that just I'm thinking about the places where the word hope is actually used, and there's a time when Elrond and Aragorn are arguing about Arwen's fate, and I think uh, Aragorn at different times. Sometimes he's like, I want her to fly. I want her to go into the West, and she won't." Or there's other times. This argument I'm thinking of where um, Aragorn says Arwen stays because she still has hope, and Elrond says she stays for you because of you. And as you were talking, I don't know what made me think of this, but it's like maybe those are the same thing, right? Hope is in one another. Hope is not necessarily an outcome. Hope is in the love that, going back to love, that she has for Aragorn. She does have belief that he can be who he was born to be and destined to be. But I love that hope, that she stays because she has hope and she stays for you. Those are not contradictory, perhaps. Maybe they're both the
Mhm.
same thing.
That's beautiful.
Hope in
Yeah.
each other, you know.
Yeah. And
Uh,
as you're saying, I'm going back also to, we just of course had Martin Luther King Day just a few days ago. And, his final message, in Memphis, the I may not get there with you.
mhm.
Like
Yeah.
there's a recognition that he's not going to get there, but
Mhm.
he's still holding on to hope.
Yeah.
And it's in those sanitation workers that they were supporting in Memphis. It's in those who were surrounding him. And yeah. So
Yeah.
there's
Love
that.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love it.
All right. Joy.
Joy. We gotta
Joy.
wrap it up with joy.
We do land the plane with it.
Yes.
Um, so I kind of in my notes had written, of like, there's like in this, there's like the obvious types of things of like the joy of, you know, it's been, evil's been defeated and they're singing in the green drag or, early on, sorry,
Right.
actually early on where they're singing in the green dragon. It's just a joyful moment
Yep.
that of life and vitality and all is well type of joy that's there. But I also just, there's a restorative joy.
Mhm.
And the word that's coming to my mind is kind of like a silliness.
Mm.
Like, you know, towards the end of Return of the King, you've got when Frodo awakens and Merry and Pippin show up, like they start jumping on the bed.
That's so great.
And
Yeah.
that there's just something about sometimes, that joy just makes you let loose.
Mhm.
Um, and that each one in that scene, as they kind of come in one at a time, each express a different aspect of joy.
Mhm.
Even Legolas smiles a little bit.
Yep. Yep.
Um, and and
With a
then
little
Sam just
twinkle in
sort
his
of
eye.
yeah, and
Yeah.
Sam just kind of stands off to the side,
Mhm.
and just
Mhm.
kind of watches. But um, so there's that that joy that's that restorative that
Yeah.
is we made it.
You know,
Yeah.
you just made me think of is and here's where our mutual friend Troy Bronsink would be helpful in helping us think about this, is that jumping on the bed. I hadn't thought about, trauma is stored in the body, right? And we have to discharge it in some way. And we do that through vigorous kind of physical activity. And that helps just kind of get all those kind of stress hormones out. And so they're jumping on the bed because they're shireling, they're halflings, they're hobbits, and they kind of can access joy in a way that maybe other more stately, whatever, beings don't. Whether they can or not is another thing. But it's also just feels like this pent up energy. And
Mhm.
that just came to me as kind of just a random thing. But here's where I also want to talk about Gimli again. Gimli, sometimes the kind of diehards don't like the fact that Gimli has kind of become a little bit of a comic relief. He's such a fierce warrior. He's such a great character, and John Rice Davies does such a good job with comedy. How could you not give him these comedic moments? And I think there's something really purposeful in that. And here's where I want to go back to the 3 hairs that Galadriel gives him. There's nothing useful in those other than to fill his own spirit and give him a sense of beauty and I think joy. He says it, what she gave him with such kind. She gave me three. So there's not this kind of ebullient kind of joy in it, but I think Gimli is such a great example of what you might call the happy warrior. And I love one of my favorite lines is certainty of death, small chance of success. What are we waiting for? That's the spirit. That's who I want going into battle with me. Like, yep, let's just do it. So, um, and I hadn't thought about. I'm really glad we had these five. We gave ourselves these five categories because I don't think I would have made the connection to Gimli as kind of maybe our avatar. I mean, the hobbits are, but I think he, in his own way, is got that joy. Holds it differently, but it's still there. Yeah.
Yeah. And we, and I'm thinking that joy has this spread of not just the happy, happy, joy, happy, happy, joy, joy. Ren, is that Ren and Stimpy? I think that was Ren.
I think so, yeah.
But that there's just like this deeper sense of what it is in the core of one's being. And that there are the elements of choosing it that go along with it, of that, but it holds with everything else. And, so yeah, I'm not a Tolkien purist, and I really loved having that. And I know some of that was also a storytelling thing with, Peter Jackson and Philippa Boyens and so forth, because this story could be just feel really heavy from start to finish if you didn't have the moment of Gimli falling off the horse, or him saying, dwarves are wasted on long distances, they're sprinters, like,
yes.
So yeah, there is something to that in a story, you need to have something where you can kind of have this levity. And if this has nothing to do with Lord of the Rings, but, I did this one wedding years ago where a whole bunch of things right from the outset were going sideways.
Oh dear.
And the bride was just you could just see the tension and literally at one point she had she was holding her arm so tightly that she lost feeling in her fingers. Like I heard her whisper to her fiance, of like, I can't feel my hands, and I'm not going to do the whole thing right now, but I have my wedding joke that, like, if it feels like things are really tense, I bust that joke out. And it never fails to just have everybody just kind of go.
That's awesome. What a great superpower.
Yeah. So
I love it.
So I think there is something to that we get, even in what we've got right now. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, like, Colbert and others are such a balm in this time is, we have to be able to laugh. And even though not as much a fan of it anymore, but I mean, to Harry Potter, to defeat the boggarts, which were your biggest fears, it was to laugh at them.
That's right. And say ridiculous. That's the incantation.
So,
yeah, that's such I love that. What a great place to stop.
Okay, Linda asks, what's the wedding joke? Do we have time for me to throw in the wedding joke?
Yeah. And it's funny because I can't see any, I don't know if there have been other comments, but I'm glad folks are with us.
Yeah, there was one, I think, from your mom that was really, really long, and I was trying to read it. And it was hard to scroll on my phone.
That's great. So. I'm so glad that, because I would talk with you even if it was just the two of us. And this says we have one person on with us, so I don't know why I can't see other people's. But tell me what. 36. Yeah, go ahead and tell the joke. Yeah.
So the joke is, there's a couple who are getting married, and they're getting married during the season of Lent, and they're getting married in this big church that has these lots of places for like beautiful banners and decor and all this kind of stuff. And so um, they'd gotten the church decorated before the wedding. Everything looks great. And then they do the photos before the wedding, but no one pays attention to the fact that somebody had forgotten to change the banners that were hanging in the chancel area. And so they go through the wedding. Everything's great. All's wonderful. They get the photo proofs back. And in the background of many of the photos of everybody says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
I love it.
So,
I love it.
yeah. I have a feeling it's one of those pastor's jokes that didn't really happen, but
No, but who
it works.
cares? Yes,
It
it's
works.
just yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. We have to laugh. And when we don't feel, when we don't feel hope, sometimes joy is what keeps us going. We hear that. I hear that all the time from my friends as they talk about their Black ancestors who struggled with slavery. They didn't feel a lot of hope, perhaps, that it was going to get better, but they dug into joy, and so that is available to us. Well, I'm so glad to have had the chance to talk with you and have folks listen in. And so, yeah, we'll see you next week, Ed, for our conclusion. And yeah, I'm working my way through Pluribus. We've got Sinners on deck potentially.
Mhm.
And then we'll be moving into Project Hail Mary season, I think, which will be a big event here at PCPH because we love the book and are hopeful
Love,
about the movie.
love the book.
So
Yes.
y'all get to reading or listening.
Yep.
It's a great audiobook. So
And by the way, if anybody wants to throw in some kind of like funny questions for us to respond to for next week's, we would love to hear it. So
yes,
if you've got any,
absolutely.
fire it off to either one of us at our sites or at
Yes.
pcph.substack.com.
Great. All right. Well, thank
All
you
right.
all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
See
And
ya.
we wish you grace.
Peace, love, hope, and joy.
There we go.
All
Yeah.
right.
Love it.
See y'all, friends.
Take care,
Bye
everybody.
bye.
Bye.